lost my way, stumble around all day. I try to stand up straight, but then I tumble down again, a cell with no wind.
Hi, and welcome to Talking with Giants. I'm your host, Scott Schilling. I like to start these shows with my pre-event prayers, so here goes. Lord, allow the words that I share here today to positively impact 100% of the lives in this audience in one way, shape, or form. Only you know who you sent here to hear this message. Allow me to do the best I can to deliver that message. Be a vehicle and of service to you. See, that's all I can ever control is a high intention and a low attachment. A high intention of imparting something good here today, and a low attachment as to what that might mean for you specifically. I know you're going to gain some really amazing nuggets out of this one because my guest, good friend Jeff McKissack, has spent 29 years addressing the subjects of profiling and threat assessment. He's taught over 350,000 people across the country, countless radio and TV shows, travels the country, does live events. Totally amazing. His company is Defense by Design. He's got a great book, The Power Proverbs for Personal Defense. We talked about this just the other day, ran into Jeff at a local restaurant, and we were talking about, is it really about learning the techniques of self-defense or learning the psychology? And so today we're going to talk a lot about the psychology, understanding those threats and the things that you need to know. Jeff, welcome to Talking with Giants.
Scott, good to be with you, buddy.
Man, so how did you get started at this 29 years ago?
Oh, like many college students, I graduated and was at home at my parents wondering, what do I do now? And I happened to catch a TV program with an interview much like what we're doing today. And the gentleman that was being interviewed was a former investigative reporter and producer for 2020 60 Minutes NBC News. This is a man who interviewed Bundy, Lucas, Gacy, most of the names we know in crime history. And he talked about how he interviewed these criminals to determine how they went about luring their victims. And from that information interviews, he developed a program called the Child Lures Crime Prevention Program. So at 22 and you have no fear, I thought, wow, this is really cool. So I hand wrote a letter and sent it to him. Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he called my parents' home in Fort Worth and said, hey, I want to meet you. So my dad put me on a plane to Vermont, and we just hit it off from the get-go. And for the next 6 or 8 years, I worked as an apprentice, not only teaching his program in public schools, but working with him to develop some of these programs that end up being on national television. And so that was the genesis of where I started. But now 29 years later, I'm still speaking the same message, but now really focused more on the adult professional audiences.
So, great place to start with your theology degree.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you had a different path in mind, but you saw that you could still serve just in a different way. God called you in a different way.
Well, and in some ways, serve even more. And I've actually halfway joked with some pastors before that, hey, great that you have a chance to minister to them in the pews. I just want to make sure they live long enough to be in the pew.
Absolutely. Great point. So, what do you think, what's escalating all the violence in our society today? What's causing the road rages and the various things? There's so many different incidents.
Well, I look at it from 2 points. I look at it from the point of the perpetrators, and I look at it from the point of the victims. From the perpetrator side, I think one of the things that's caused the escalation is not just what we could consider to be career criminals, but people that literally are in more moments of opportunity. Maybe they got released from their job, and now they're stressed out. How am I going to pay my bills? And they get desperate and they do things. Or the person's afraid they may lose their job, and now they're on their way home and they're distracted and somebody's honking a horn at them. Boom, and now you've got a road rage case just because the person is stressed, they're scared. So you have the career criminal, but then you also just have those people, they're normally rational people. But when you cross their path, you're the proverbial wrong place, wrong person, wrong time, when this normally rational person just goes, and there you are. So from the perpetrator side, I think change, stress, even technology and how that's changing people's lives, all that factors into potential rises from the perpetrator side. From the victim side, I think it's because if you really, really think about this, and we talked about it the other day, unless you've served in military, law enforcement, or security, my guess is no one has taught you about your personal safety since 6th grade. And even when we did so in 6th grade, how do we do it? Through puppets, talking dogs, puppets, and jingles. Well, gee, that's realistic. And then what typically we tell our kids? Don't take candy from strangers. But mom and dad, they see you doing surveys and doing all kinds of things all the time. Buy this, get this free, show up this many times this restaurant, get this free. So they see you kind of taking candy from strangers. Well, next thing is don't get in a car with a stranger. But mom and dad, you called Uber.
Yeah.
And so there's
For sure.
another breakdown. Or the worst of the worst, don't talk to strangers. Well, the problem with that, if teaching your children this, is number one, it's not typically a stranger that poses your child the greatest threat. And statistically speaking, we know that. But also, you can't function in society without talking to strangers. So it's just not even practical to teach your kids. You're teaching them to be antisocial. So again, that's the limit of most people's education dealing with their personal safety unless they've been in military, law enforcement, or security. So when you turn on the TV and you see these stories, as many people that reach out to me say, Jeff, can you believe they did that? Yes, because probably no one's talked to them about their safety since they were in the 6th grade.
Is it a part of, in the 6th grade, even then, they're kind of taking away the physical sports, they're taking away some of the things that might have allowed you to have some strength or some technique or something, not defense necessarily, but just some athleticism. Do you think that's part of it?
Well, and even nowadays, if you look at kids where it used to be wrestling or boxing or other contact type sports, and even with the girls, softball and other things, now you have a whole generation of kids that are basically exhibiting themselves and expressing themselves athletically with online athletic games. So there's really not that physical cathartic effect that is taking place. So again, when you see these type of things happening, to me, it's no leap of logic to see where we're at today, because the kids today, rather than, and well-meaning parents, well-meaning educators, have pulled kids aside. We have these zero tolerance policies in schools where kids get into trouble, and kids just simply defend themselves, maybe against a bully or others, and yet we're slapping them down saying, no, you don't do that. You don't hit people. Well, under any circumstance? Because what if your daughter's in the back seat of a young boy's car and she's saying no, but he's not paying attention? What if one day your son grows up and he's out with his wife or maybe kids and he's approached by 3 thugs on the street, but you have trained them, oh, we don't hit people, we never use violence. Well, the other people out there aren't playing by the same rules. So what has happened is, rather than training what Mother Nature gave us, we've tamed what Mother Nature gave us. And so even simple survival skills like biting, scratching, clawing, things that we would normally do, we've trained a whole generation of people and domesticated them to the point they don't even know the basics of how to defend themselves if they had to.
I know we were talking the other day and situational awareness came up, and it makes so much sense. But again, where are we being taught that?
Nowhere.
Or if we're not, how can we be?
Well, and unfortunately, that's the problem. That's why I've had a gainful career for 29 years, because there's really no one out there teaching us. Now, we look to law enforcement, but is that really the job of law enforcement? Because the minute police start shifting responsibilities and duties, and then something happens in the public, what's the first thing the public yells? Right. Where were the police when this happened? Well, they were out there in the schools teaching your kids what mom and dad, you should be teaching them.
Right.
It's a no-win situation for the police. But that's typically if we get it from somewhere where most people gain it from. But the police are there for law enforcement. They're not there as educators in the community.
Yeah, it'd be really tough to be a cop today. Just a tough situation to be in, but we need that help. Now, we were talking again the other day about real estate agents going into doing showings of houses and a variety of different things. I know that you help organizations set up safety procedures, situational awareness. Can you touch on that a little bit?
I just, in fact, did a radio show yesterday on realtor safety, and this week I'm speaking to the Institute of Real Estate Management here in Dallas, dealing with commercial realtors. So both sides of that fence, because there are certain positions out there, realtors being one of them, that are constantly interacting with an unknown public. Somebody sets up an appointment, oh, I want to see this property, residential or commercial. So here this realtor goes out to meet with this person they've never met before. They don't know necessarily the agenda, they don't know the outcome. They're just going out there hoping that the person is who they say they are and is looking to buy the property or rent the property, not shopping for them personally. And a lot of those stories, both men and women alike, have gone very, very wrong. So yes, helping companies put together policies, procedures, do on-site training for your employees so that they're better educated when you send them out. And according to OSHA and a lot of other groups out there, including our courts, if you send your employees out, you are responsible for their safety. No differently than when a school takes a field trip or they take a group on a senior trip or whatever. If something happens to one of those kids, who do we hold responsible?
And in a tough economy, when real estate, when it wasn't a buyer's market, when all of a sudden the realtors might not have been making the big checks, and all of a sudden somebody says, I want to look at this big house, this big listing with big dollars, there's a big commission there. It's really easy to get blinded by that, isn't it?
Oh, anybody in commission sales. And realtors are just one I've talked to. I've talked to visiting nurses that get called into these situations. I've talked to so many different types of in-home service providers, even financial planners I've talked to. I had one that told me, and he was in his mid-50s. He said, Jeff, I went to meet a male client one day at home. Went up at the door, his wife greeted me in a negligee. He wasn't there yet. Come to find my secretary, he wasn't the one that placed the phone call. She was.
Wow.
So there's so many different situations that people that provide in-home services, in-home consulting, they run into, but even in retail environments, you can't control who comes through the front door. Or in a situation now of identity theft and security breaches, where someone comes in the front door and they say they're pest control, they say they're with the security company, they say they're with the copy repair guy, or whatever the case may be, and we let them in the places of our business, and they're back in the room doing what we think is their job responsibilities when they're going through files, they're putting stuff on flash drives, and they're walking right out the front door with proprietary or sensitive information because we assumed that they were who they said they were.
You shared a story with Peggy and I the other day that just, wow, it sent shivers up my spine about the new prospective next-door neighbor.
Yeah.
Share that with the audience. It's just mind-boggling.
This is about 6 months or so ago. I, like many people, use a service called nextdoor.com. It's kind of like Facebook for your neighborhood. And this elderly couple in my neighborhood posted this story where their house next door is for sale. Not their house, but the neighbor's house next door for sale. So one day they hear this knock on the door. They open it up, nicely dressed woman there. Hi, I'm your new neighbor. And they're thinking, oh my gosh, our new neighbor, come on in. We want to get to know you. So she comes in, they visit a little bit, and she said, you know, I've been thinking about doing some things in the backyard, and I'm afraid it might intrude upon the property line a little bit. Do you mind if I show you what I'm thinking of doing? So they all go to the backyard, they visit for a little bit, they come back inside, they chit-chat a little more, and she leaves. Sooner or later, the husband or wife go to the back bedroom for something. The whole place has been ransacked. She was the lure or the ruse to get them in the backyard while accomplice or accomplices robbed their home. But here's a situation, no gun or knife was used. It was a good story, and by the way, it was involving a woman as the lure. And so often we think of the overt attacks of guns, knives, and guys, not the covert attack when a woman can be used, an elderly person can be used, a child can be used, and it's all based upon a good story.
So what are some of the common myths and mistakes when it comes to safety and security, either individually or in a corporate situation?
Well, number one is always, well, it'll never happen to me. And I ask people to define what is it? Because there's a myriad of things can happen to any one of us on any given day. So that off the bat is just a myth. But also things where people think that their safety is somehow tied into where they are. How many times have you seen something on the news where someone has been a victim of violence? And then some neighbor, some resident, some patron from the mall in the area, whatever, comes on TV and says something like this. Oh, I can't believe something like that happened here because where we live is so safe. And I've been telling people for over 20 years, there are no such thing as safe or unsafe places. There's only safe or unsafe people. Stop paying attention to where you are and start paying attention to who you're around or who is around you, which changes moment by moment. But that means that we have to start looking up from our cell phones, that we have to take the earbuds out of our ear when we're walking and jogging to pay attention. I joke with people that 29 years ago when I started this work, my biggest challenge was telling people, look around. Now my biggest challenge is telling people, look up. Because we're so distracted by these little things in our hands.
So not only distracted driving, distracted walking, distracted jogging, distracted everything. How do we spot, I know your tagline, spot trouble before it spots you.
Yeah.
So how do we do that? What's our best process, or is there a series?
There's a series, but I will say it goes back to, first of all, understand that every predator on the planet, whether on 2 legs or 4 legs, looks for 2 key factors, distraction and disorientation. Distraction, what we were talking about. If you're looking down here more than you're looking around, and if you've got something in your ear where you can't even hear someone coming upon you, that's a problem. When we talk about disoriented, well, that could be not knowing where you parked in the parking lot, or you went to the happy hour and you're leaving a little bit happier than everyone else, staggering out to the car. Or someone slipped something into your drink and now you're disoriented due to someone else's hidden agenda. But distraction, disorientation are the two critical things that every predator on the planet looks for when they're stalking prey. So point is, don't be distracted and don't allow yourself to become disoriented. There's two simple things you can do to help you spot trouble before it spots you.
Yeah, that's great advice there. Now, I know you address what's referred to today as social engineering. Can you share that a little bit with everybody?
It's basically when someone is taking on the persona or profession of someone that they're not, period. And we've seen this play out even in local news here where people pretend to be an electric company, they pretend to work for the security company, they pretend to work for the plumbing, whatever the case may be, and we're allowing people in their place of business, we're allowing them in their homes. And most of those cases aren't violence, but they're casing the place for later burglary or theft. But still, it can be a situation where someone, as we had a fitness instructor murdered here just about a month ago at a church, where they pretend to be a police officer and it allows the person to close the distance because they think this person is there to lend them assistance or for their safety, and that wasn't the case at all. Bundy and Lucas used this quite well years ago, which is simply a fake badge saying, hey, your car's been broken into, we need to prove it's yours. You happen to have your registration insurance on your person. So they lured the person to the car. Not with a gun or knife. And by the way, they did it in broad daylight in highly populated areas. Think about that.
So really against what you would have been trained to do, or not really trained, but your common sense would say they would never do it here.
Right, because I'm in a populated area in broad daylight. Yes, but that's where you started the engagement and the conversation. By the time you finished it, you were at their car and no one else was around.
Yeah.
So it's that luring process of bringing people in. Again, not with a gun or knife, but a good story.
Well, that's part of the conversation my lovely wife Peggy and you and I had the other day. She kept on getting, so Jeff, do you teach hand-to-hand combat? And you kept on saying, well, I do, but that's not what this is really about. It's situational awareness. So address that for a second. Not that you don't do that, but why you're choosing to do what you do from the psychology side.
Because I deal with a lot of people who go back into real estate. When I've worked with so many realtors, many of them were 50 and above. And to call upon someone 50 and above to now start to learn to defend themselves physically, can they do it? Yes. But it's going to take a lot more dedication. There's going to be a lot more pain involved in it. But could they do it? Sure they could. Other people have opted for pepper spray and stun guns and even firearms. And while I get that, not every confrontation calls for a lethal response. And so there has to be some bridge in between these two things, knowing that not everybody that may even confront you is deserving of death penalty. So we need to learn that there's a force continuum that is called for. And some things you need to address hand to hand and you're justified. Other times you're justified in taking it to that next level of force. But if you've not trained in either of those levels of force, what are you going to do?
You know, I don't think that there's I've never seen a curriculum that's Self-Defense 101 or Self-Mastery 101 to really make sure that you don't have those issues. And again, we had this conversation about weapons, guns, knives, tasers, stun guns,
pepper spray,
whistles,
smartphone apps, yeah, you name it.
All the different things. What's your take on all that? Because I know what it is, but I want you to share it with the audience.
The direct quote is, and I quote, "I'm not against anything that makes you feel safer, as long as you understand that no one single thing will ever make you safe. So whatever your plan A, have a plan B and a plan C. Always think in terms of 3 layers of protection." End quote.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. Again, we had that conversation, and of course we live in Texas, and everybody goes, well, I can carry.
And you can.
And that's awesome. It's great that you have the ability to carry, but what is from a security standpoint, you told us the amount of distance that it takes. Share that with everybody.
Yeah,
that's just fascinating to me.
I don't care if you have pepper spray or stun gun, a taser, a firearm, whatever. There is a mindset that police have been taught, and trained for years. It's called the 21-foot rule. If you go to YouTube, you put in 21, 21, and then foot rule. You'll see the same video that police have seen for years, which basically demonstrates the fact that if you allow a perpetrator to get within 21-foot radius of you, they will get to you before you'll ever get anything out of your pocket or holster. Which means you take the average person, let's say that realtor or others, is already in a close environment, and someone acts, what's the chance then, unless it was already in your hand to begin with, of you pulling off that weapon as a legitimate response? And this is why I also advocate for the physical training, because I'm not against someone protect themselves, whatever the device du jour happens to be. But if you can't get to it in the moment you need it, what are you going to do to provide a buffer, both in distance and in time, for you to retrieve that weapon if one or more people are on you at the same time? It's the element of surprise.
Yeah, I think that's the other thing that's so important to understand. If you have a weapon, number one, you better be trained to use that weapon.
And have the will to use it.
And have the will to use that weapon, which I think that's the one that gets bandied about a little bit. Mm-hmm. But the other side of it is, what happens if all of a sudden your weapon becomes their weapon?
Yeah, what happens?
Probably not a good thing.
That's not a good thing. And that's one of the things I constantly have to remind people about, that there's always a chance that your weapon won't work the way you thought it would, whatever it is. There's always a chance it could be taken away from you, used against you. So choose your weapons carefully, knowing that if it's taken away from you and used against you, how easy is it for the other person to use that weapon?
Yeah, it's a strange thing to flash through my head, but I just had a picture of a realtor walking around showing a house with a gun in their hand. You know, I mean,
good way to get them to buy that day.
That's a tough close right there.
For shotgun weddings,
exactly.
For pistol closings.
The pistol closing. No, you know, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. If you can't get it out quickly, if you can't do it, it's like it's not there to begin with. It doesn't matter. You've got to have. That's why I'm so impressed with what you do. I've been to a number of your trainings, and you do such a great job of helping people understand how to take care of themselves better. It's really a personal responsibility kind of thing, isn't it?
And first of all, thank you for saying all that. But yes, and one thing I've advocated for years, and why police love when I say this, personal safety is a personal responsibility. The only bodyguard that you and I get in life is the one we see when we look in the mirror. And that's it. The police are not there as our bodyguards. They're there to protect the public. So we need to do what we can to make their jobs easier. And that's exactly where I'm coming from, that there are things we can do proactively that can help enhance our safety, the safety of our loved ones, the safety of our community. It's incumbent upon us to take the lead, not basically depend upon others to protect us for us.
You know, I think we first met about the time my daughter Jordan was heading off to college, and boy, that was a scary time for me. My son too.
Yeah.
But
especially
something
the
about
girls, I get
my
it.
baby girl
Yep.
going to school.
Especially when you see the news stories today, what's happening on college campuses.
Yeah, it's just crazy. How do we get you out in the public more?
Well, you can start by contacting me. But there are different groups. I go out to companies, corporations. I have certain companies that contract me as a value add to their clients, customers, and members. And then I have various public groups that will bring me in, and sometimes it's a charge to the participants that come in for the seminar versus someone just paying me to come in. But I'm always willing to work with people. It's one of the reasons I call my company Defense by Design, because I try to do what I can to make my message as accessible as it can be to as many people who really want to avail themselves to it.
And it is a message that needs to get out there. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do the show. It was great. It was a God thing that we ran into each other the other day, and it just so happened that this spot opened up a day later. I mean, how did that happen? But this is such an important message to really get out there. How do we get a hold of you, and how do we make those things happen?
Well, simply defensebydesign.com. Go to the website. You can email me from there. Also, I realize I can't be everywhere because only God's omnipresent. So what I've begun to do now is license and train other people. I call them trouble spotters, playing off the theme of spot trouble before trouble spots you. And this is open for anyone. I just had a pastor from Indiana contact me yesterday to become licensed to begin teaching this as an outreach of his church in his community. So anyone out there who might be interested or knows someone who has good public speaking skills, who may be looking for opportunities to go out and speak in the public, to do a good work, good PR for their company, I certainly welcome them to come on board and join us and help spread this message, because again, I can't be everywhere, but certainly I love to be wherever I can.
Yeah, no, and you do such an excellent job when you're presenting yourself, but your trouble spotters, the churches that are putting this into their children's program, youth pastors, a variety of different people being certified to be able to share this information. What a great value add within a church. I know you do it with insurance companies and you do it with real estate and things like that, but within the church home itself, what a valuable thing to bring.
Well, and for instance, this pastor is planning, he's on the school board in his community. He's already talked to people with the school board about him going into the schools in the high school, maybe even junior high, and actually teaching some of these programs at those levels. What a great outreach from his church into the community.
Yeah, just fabulous way to get out there and be able to be the living example we've been called to be again, that of service and education and doing all those things. We're running short on time. What one last thing would you share with everybody? I know this is...
There's
Give me the
always,
capsule.
yeah, there's always the ending soundbite. And for 29 years, when people said, Jeff, if you could sum it up into one thing, what would you want to leave us with? And I've never changed my ending in 29 years. Trust your instincts. If all else fails, God has given you not only the gray matter between your two ears, but that sense that we all have when something or someone just isn't right. The times that we go wrong are the times that we don't pay attention and appreciate that gift. So if all else fails, trust your instincts.
Yeah, I think it's really such a valuable piece of information to understand that still small voice. And quite frankly, this is a great way of training that still small voice within you to hear God and the impressions that He's leaving on you. He's given us all this ability. We're all intuitive. We all have this feel. There's something that just isn't right. It's there for a reason. It's not spidey sense. This has been put in by God for our benefit to do this the right way, quite frankly. Jeff, I want to thank you for being here. I mean, we could go on for hours and hours. We're going to have you back for another show and talk more about it. Make sure that you tune in every Saturday for Talking with Giants. We're going to continue to bring you great guests like Jeff McKissack, Defense by Design. Please reach out to him, get a hold of him, because he can make a difference in your life. I know we've been friends for a long time, and he just continues to raise things in my awareness that I want to know. Again, for Talking with Giants, thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next week. God bless.
Hi, this is Scott Schilling, your host for Talking with Giants. Recently, I discovered that somewhere around the world, a child dies every 5 seconds due to malnutrition, the lack of access to clean drinking water, or insect-borne diseases. It's a human tragedy that's so easy to prevent. In fact, when I began looking into what people like you and me can do, I discovered a company who's sending life-saving products to the world's most needy children and their communities. World Impact Solutions is dedicated to address these issues head-on. Could you join me in this mission? Simply go to WISSavesLives.com and purchase any or all of the life-saving products in any quantity. World Impact Solutions will make sure that children in more than 70 countries will benefit from your generosity. I know I can count on you. World Impact Solutions makes it simple.